Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us for another installment of the Talent Matters webinar series. Very excited for today's session. As a quick reminder, you guys know nationwide talent shortages are at a 10-year high with no immediate end in sight and no one-size-fits-all solution. To challenge businesses and organizations to think creatively, we created the Talent Matters webinar series to help you develop, attract, and retain talent here in Flint, Genesee. Today's session, we're going to be discussing diversity in the workplace, and with us we have Sandra Johnson, who is the Director of DEI and Community Affairs here with the Flint Genesee Group. This session aims to promote awareness and understanding of how people with different backgrounds, cultures, ages, races, genders, sexuality, religions, etc., can best work together harmoniously. It's been a hot topic over the last few years, and it is definitely a subject that creeps into the workplace and is very important to the talent that you have in your own workplaces. So we're excited to have Sandy here to discuss that with us today. So Sandy, I'm going to go ahead and pull up your slides and hand it over to you.
Excellent. Good afternoon. Thank you, Brianna, for that. As Bri mentioned, I am the Director of DEI and Community Relations here at the Flint Genesee Group. And I work closely with Brianna and the rest of our team, bringing various aspects of DEI training, both internally with our staff and externally with community stakeholders and partners such as yourselves. Bri mentioned that this has been a hot topic, and by late 2020, summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, there were resounding calls from Americans to address systemic racism. And this all took place amid a public health crisis and an economic crisis. And it quickly became clear that businesses should lead the way. When introduced to or trying to figure out how to navigate issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, CEOs, directors, managers, and staff alike have all been doing their best to adapt to the social unrest and civil discord, even in person learning with safety protocols due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this leaves little to no time to create a sense of inclusion and belonging in our workplaces. As a result, many employees are feeling isolated, and some question whether their current or prospective employer is really where they want to be. At the Flint Genesee Group, our core values is to be inclusive to elevate all, which sets the foundation for making diversity and inclusiveness a priority at our organization. Our conversation here today is specifically about the aspect of what is commonly called diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging, or DEI, and how to infuse that into your business strategies and the operations. We can think of these concepts as D for diversity is your workforce and your labor force. The E for equity means that all employees can have similar outcomes. The I for inclusion is where culture supports positive experiences for all. And then, of course, belonging, where employees can be seen, connected, supported, and proud of where they work. A solid DEI strategy is an intentional, purposeful action to achieve a goal within your organization. Overall, today's webinar will provide a high level overview and a good mix of what diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging is, and how to build inclusive workspaces and leave walking away with a few strategies to test out in your work environment. And so, on our journey today, we will focus on what is diversity and defining diversity. We'll talk a little bit about the benefits of workplace diversity, the differences between diversity and inclusion, of course, inclusive leadership, and then overall, the bottom line of diversity in the workplace. And so, in order to begin to talk about diversity in the workplace, we have to first embrace diversity. And by embracing diversity in our workplaces, we are more apt to take the time necessary to learn about our colleagues, our coworkers, and our community partners along the way. Embracing diversity means to be curious and inclusive, to embrace people of all backgrounds and with perspectives that are different from your own. Embracing diversity means to be sensitive to the intrinsic differences that makes us individuals. We make better decisions when we consider multiple points of view and act as a team with common goals. And those are just a few of the ways to embrace diversity in your workplace. So, when we talk about what is diversity, diversity involves making sure that your organization reflects the markets or communities in which you operate. It's about maintaining an employee base as diverse as the consumers or the patients or the students in the broader market, as well as making sure your employee selection is reflective of those served by your organization and in your local communities. This means that your employees, whether it's men or women of all generations, from all types of ethnic and racial backgrounds, sexual orientation, and varying abilities, will parallel the multiple demographic segments within your community and understand the needs of the market. This will allow you to enable your organization to serve those different groups better than others in the competition. They said by 2050, the United States population is expected to increase by 50%, and groups of color will make up nearly half of that population. International immigration will play a role in shaping the future ethnic and racial compositions, as well as impact the minority majority crossover. 1/4 of all Americans will be of Hispanic or Latin origin, and almost 1 in 10 Americans will be Asian or Pacific Islander descent. There'll be more women and people with diverse abilities in the job market. And so basically, there'll just be more diversity where we live, where we work, and where we do business. So yes, the definition of diversity has changed over the years, over the months, over the weeks even. In addition to fostering a workplace inclusive of race, gender, and sexual orientation, to only name a few, many organizations will seek value in something much simpler, and that is the diversity of thought. This is especially true in industries and businesses that are known for being less or limited in diversity, like law firms or high-tech companies. And so it is critical that industries such as this seek out talent with different thinking and problem-solving backgrounds. And that's indicative to diversity being more than race or ethnicity. Diversity is differences in racial and ethnic and socioeconomic and geographic backgrounds, and people with different opinions, degrees and social experiences, religious beliefs, political practices, sexual orientations and gender identity, heritage and life experiences. Diversity means more than just acknowledging or tolerating difference. It is a set of conscious practices that involve understanding and appreciating the interdependence of humanity, the many cultures, and even in our natural environment. It's also practicing mutual respect for qualities and experiences that are different from our own, understanding that diversity includes not only ways of being, but also ways of knowing, and recognizing that personal, cultural, and institutionalized discrimination creates and sustains privileges for some while creating and sustaining disadvantages for others. It allows us to build alliances across our differences so that we can work together to eradicate all forms of discrimination. Diversity includes knowing how to relate to those qualities and conditions that are different from our own and outside of the groups that we typically belong to, yet are present in other individuals and groups. So again, having a diverse workplace is not only about race and cultural backgrounds. It encompasses a wide variety of contributions. Some people are more analytical, while others are more artistic. People from varying religious, political, socioeconomic backgrounds possess different perspectives on the world and other specific issues. There are individuals who are introverts and others who are extroverts. And finally, we acknowledge that these categories of difference are not always fixed, but also can be very fluid. And we continue to respect individual rights to self-identification and recognize that no one culture is intrinsically superior to the other. When organizations and businesses bring all of these types of people together, they're likely to see more creativity, new and better ideas, and an improved service delivery. And that means your workforce. Workforce diversity refers to an individual characteristics employees may have that make them unique. The workforce diversity definition can include gender, race, ethnicity, religion, all the things we talked about a few moments ago. But it also includes employees' life experiences, how they solve issues, and socioeconomic status. Ideally, an organization should reflect the diversity of each of these groups and leverage the diverse power of these individuals for innovation and growth. A few examples of workforce diversity include cognitive diversity, where employees have different styles of thought in recognizing problems and finding solutions, or lifestyle diversity, where people lead various lifestyles outside of their work that influence their professional life. Diversity is about diverse ideas, diverse employees with diverse talents, and diverse customers and community partners. Diversity in the workforce is also brand and reputation. Some companies are more inclusive in their hiring practices and in creating teams, which can help attract more diverse employees and clients. This requires inclusive leaders, and inclusive leaders in organizations see diversity as its greatest opportunity and what sets them apart from others in the market. Diversity in the workplace also brings new perspectives. It encourages new perspectives with people from a wide range of backgrounds, offering their views, their expertise, and their experiences. These varying perspectives can help with faster problem solving, increased creativity, and overall creates a better, more creative decision-making process. The bottom line is that through the embracing and embedding of diversity into your programs and strategies, that businesses and organizations can better understand the needs of different stakeholders and partners and bring those new solutions to the table. And that's another way that diversity helps to retain talent. It starts with your human resources and recruiting and marketing and gaining access to different candidates. Many companies spend tons of capital going to the same colleges and universities and the same media outlets to recruit the same types of individuals. And this is a huge waste of money. If a more diverse workforce is what you're seeking, diversity helps to retain talent, and therefore is less attrition, when hiring managers are intentional about where they post their positions. By looking outside of traditional hiring matrix, which are flawed, companies can focus on the potential employee who is more than a right fit, but a value or culture add to help the organization thrive. Companies that embrace diversity and inclusion report higher engagement, lower turnover, and increased profits. Striving for a diverse workforce can make your company more appealing to job seekers and existing employees. Most organizations that embrace this approach are seen as socially responsible and have a better reputation in their communities. A few examples of companies that embody this is starting right here with the Flint Genesee Group. Other companies and organizations such as Accenture and Novartis, Gap, L'Oreal, and Nestle all have intentionally modified their traditional recruiting and hiring practices, which helps diversify the workforce and retain the talent. One thing I love about diversity as a self-proclaimed chef is that diversity is in the mix. Diversity is about diverse ideas, talent, and customers and partners. Having this mix, this ingredients, if you will, like mixing a cake. This is what makes our organizations thrive. Being able to recognize the differences in each of these ingredients and think of them as the employees and the community partners and stakeholders that you work with. Understanding that it takes every single one of these ingredients to make the cake. And leaving something out or excluding something may cause your cake to not rise. It may cause it to not taste the way you desired it to taste. And so when we're thinking about our bottom lines, our missions, and our vision statements, we want to think about our workforce and our engagement in our communities as being as diverse as the ingredients that it takes to make a cake. Diversity is in the mix of what we do. But having that diversity in your workforce is just the first step. While diverse representation is naturally required, it's how organizations utilize their diverse talent that will make the difference between an effort that provides lip service or just checking a box and one that obtains the great results that we're all striving for. Understanding that your workforce will consist of individuals with varying degrees of culture, or basically people who identify themselves in a variety of different ways. Your organization must become increasingly more aware of the challenges pertaining to cultural change. For example, white males should not be made to feel uncomfortable around multi ethnic groups because of their race, gender, sexual orientation, or their history. And accordingly, white men and women may also have to adjust to sharing some of the privileges that were once restricted to their group. The key here is to ensure that all employees are not focused on losing ground, but excited about what the future holds and its potential through embracing and embedding a DEI strategy in your workplace. In a recent Deloitte survey, 80% of employees considered inclusion an essential factor for choosing their employer. There is no diversity without inclusion. Imagine hosting a dinner party where every guest has their own set of preferences. Some are vegetarian, while others are vegans. Some have gluten allergies, and others don't like eggs. The problem is, you have already set your menu, and even unknowingly, you have managed to alienate half of your guests. Seeing that that was the issue, you make a few changes, and the next time you hosted the dinner, and then the following week, and the week after that, until finally you create a menu that every guest manages to enjoy. Diversity is getting the dinner invitation. Inclusion is making sure everyone enjoys the meal. Many businesses focus solely on improving workplace diversity. And this check the box mentality is one of the reasons why they're not successful. 75% fail to see the benefits of diversity because they don't invest in diverse employees. A significant bottom line effect of poorly managed diversity is high turnover. Dissatisfied employees that feel like the work environment is unsafe will leave. Constantly replacing employees lost to ill will or general feeling of discontent is costly, as a company or business has to pay to hire and train its replacements. Increasing diversity does not by itself increase effectiveness. What matters is how an organization harnesses that diversity and whether it's willing to reshape its power structure. Instead, we must move beyond just checking the box or looking for a certain box to be checked on an application. Getting out of the checkbox mode not only helps in recruiting and retaining more people from underrepresented identity groups, but also tapping their identity related knowledge and experiences of all staff. And it offers us resources for learning how the organization can perform its core work even better. And therefore, organizations need to embody inclusive leadership, and not just for the CEO or the president or the leadership cabinet, but for all employees at all levels. Inclusion is the mix, is making the mix work. Diversity is the mix, but inclusion is making the mix work. Diversity and inclusion go hand in hand. An inclusive workplace is one where every person is heard, valued, and respected. Many companies have gotten comfortable with the idea of bringing in people who look different. The problem is, if those people start to act differently, they get told, we don't do it here that way. And then it caused the person to say, I thought you wanted me because I was different. And the unspoken answer is always, we like the fact that you look different, but we don't really like the fact that you think and behave differently. As a manager, as a leader in your organization, you need to prioritize inclusion, not just diversity, to engage and empower your teams. A strong diversity and inclusion program can improve knowledge sharing, decrease turnover, and even increase loyalty. The mix. The mix is to achieve these outcomes, making sure that everyone's voice is heard and show your employees that you respect their traditions and their backgrounds. You may also organize inclusion awareness events and training activities focused on diversity and inclusion. Implement these initiatives at all levels of the organization, starting from the top. Inclusive leaders see diversity as their biggest opportunity. They allow diversity to flourish within their organizations. How do they do that? By challenging the status quo and any assumptions of their own or of others, and making sure that there is no political bias. Inclusive leaders learn with an open mind and rarely make the same mistake twice. They also ruthlessly prioritize. This drives execution excellence through discipline and collaboration. Inclusive leaders actively give and receive feedback. They leverage each other's strengths to deliver results and develop every individual within the organization. They also take smart risks by leveraging all possible attitude and opportunities, including resources and talents. And lastly, one of my favorites is inclusive leaders demonstrate a winning spirit. They create a can-do attitude and display positive energy when interacting with their teams. It's when we as inclusive leaders demonstrate these characteristics that fresh new perspectives are welcomed in the workplace, and therefore enables us to embrace inclusion. Research suggests that having a strong diversity and inclusion strategy can help your organization attract top talent. So, what better motivation for companies to adopt such policies than a clear return on investment by employing the brightest people in the industry? Educate the leaders. We cannot take for granted that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and creating a more inclusive workspace, that everyone knows what we mean. We cannot assume that all leaders, all staff people, members, that they get it. The executives and your C-suite and your leaders in your departments and your divisions are instrumental to the organization's DEI efforts. The atmosphere, the tone of the organization is dictated by leadership. So we want to make certain that we ensure that our leaders are knowledgeable about why embedding DEI is critical to the success of the organization and ways to demonstrate their commitment from the top down. Another way to embrace inclusion in the workspace is to form an inclusion council. You need people who are going to make the time to roll up their sleeves and do the work. Small 8 to 10 dedicated group of diversity or inclusion champions can serve as a channel for communication between staff and leadership. They can serve as advocates for inclusiveness with the executive suite as necessary. And it should also be involved in the DEI work across the organization. This group should be as diverse as possible, with members representing not only different ethnicities and gender, but also different functions within the organization and the community it serves. This group should receive adequate training and be knowledgeable of the organization's DEI strategy. Celebrating differences. One of the most important ways to show employees that you respect their backgrounds and traditions is to invite them to share those characteristics in the workplace. Being conscious of your communication style. Don't assume you know more than others by explaining concepts that they may already understand. You want to promote active debate and be courteous. Creating an inclusive mindset is not a linear process. It will take time and consistent effort. There'll be stops and starts along the way. But cultivating inclusion is an evolving process with constantly moving targets. The work is never done. A company's goal and tactics must evolve along with the needs of the current and of their current and their potential talent. There's some characteristics of an inclusive workplace that I'd like to share at this time. When you're considering and looking for inclusivity within the workplace, you want to make sure that you're looking at an organization that accepts diversity and inclusion as a way of life. It just is what they do. It operates under transparent policies and procedures. It creates and maintains a learning culture for all, recognizing that it is part of the community that it serves, living by its mission and core values. An inclusive workplace is one that values earned privilege over unearned privilege, and one that embraces and accepts change. So knowing that as you go into your workspace and looking for other opportunities to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion work, it's important to remember that diversity and inclusion are more than just buzzwords. As you can tell from the time we spent here today, diversity and inclusion, not to mention equity and belonging and accessibility, are more than those words. They require action. First, you must call a thing a thing. If your organization is lacking in diversity, lacking in equitable practices and experiences, if your leadership can benefit from learning more about inclusivity, then you have to be willing to acknowledge that part. Once you have identified the areas that need additional support or celebrating the great successes you may have already gained, you have to first call it what it is. Get it off of the shelf, off of the bookshelf in the break room or the virtual shelf in the cloud where documents go to die. Start by embracing the diversity within your organization and using some of the tools shared here today. There are thousands of resources out there for your DEI toolbox. The information is widely available and will seem pretty much the same. However, it must come off of the paper, off of the screen, and become more than just something you declared that you were going to do in your organization at the height of 2020 when our nation was once again at civil unrest. And so our bottom line is that diversity means having employees from different demographics. Inclusion is making all of your employees feel welcomed and included. Diversity and inclusion raise productivity and satisfaction in the workplace. Workplace inclusion starts with addressing our own biases. And then lastly, ensuring workplace diversity and inclusion must be a group effort, not limited to your CDO, your Chief Diversity Officer, or your Director of Diversity and Inclusion. It requires all staff, all employees, all community partners to be a part of this great work. It is a group effort. And that is it for our discussion on diversity in the workplace here on Today with the Flint Genesee Group. My contact information is here. We'll drop it in the comments section so that you all can feel free to reach out to me if there's any questions that you may have or find are interested in ways where your organization can continue its DEI journey with further training and webinars and opportunities such as this. Thank you so much, Brianna.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And it truly is a journey, one that takes time, one that takes a lot of thought. Like you said, your information is here on the screen. So for those who are watching, if you have questions, comments, or you're looking for ongoing educational opportunities, please feel free to reach out to myself or Sandra at any time. If you have a question at this moment, though, now's the time to type that into the comment box. So feel free to leave a comment, whether you're watching on Facebook, whether you're watching on YouTube, and that will come through to us. A couple of things that I jotted down that have related to some of the ideas and practices that we've been talking about throughout this webinar series, Sandra, that I was hoping we could discuss a little bit more. When it comes to recruitment, you talked a little bit earlier about how much money organizations are spending on recruiting the same types of people, the same types of talent. You go back to the same colleges and universities and job fairs, and you're going to get the same thing over and over again. What are some of those non-traditional recruitment methods that you might have been referring to?
I think one great way, looking around your community and checking out civic organizations. Go to HBCU, a historically Black college or university. Begin to see where activity is happening in your community and what areas it's surrounding around. And just trying to avoid the same go-to spaces and places. If you want more diversity in your workplace, you have to go where the diversity is.
Mm-hmm.
That may mean going to the NAACP or the Urban League. It may mean going to an Arab American institute or a Hispanic or Latin a commission or organization within your community. And asking and seeking their support so that you can tap into those resources of diverse employees. It may be your disability network or an organization or business that supports individuals with diverse abilities. And so it requires that work on behalf of the Human Resources Department, as well as others, leaders in the organization, to begin to think outside of that box and go where the people are.
Mm-hmm. In that first webinar on recruitment series, recruitment strategies, we also talked a lot about skills versus requirements. And you might have that talent sitting right there with you internally, but they're being held back by a requirement that doesn't apply to them, but they might have 10, 15, 20 years of experience and skills built up. So that's something to look at too when you're thinking of non-traditional recruitment methods. I also had a question going back to the idea of this journey, that it's an ongoing process for workplaces, for their teams. How do you tell that you're not missing the mark? How can you tell that you are on track with what it is that the talent that you currently have is looking for and expecting of you as an employer?
I think first it is important to not just look for a good fit, right? You want to have employees and colleagues that add value and add culture to your organization. One way that you can see that at work is when your projects are more collaborative, when
Mm-hmm.
you're seeing more allyship within your organization, when you're seeing opportunities for promotion, when you're celebrating anniversaries, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years within your organization, and you're recognizing that the people look a little differently than they did 5 years or 10 years ago. So you'll begin to see a lot of that will be visible and you'll be able to feel it. The energy will change within your organization, the collaboration that you'll begin to see, the project completion, the timeliness, people not working in silos, I think is the first evidence of being able to realize that your DEI strategy is actually starting to shape.
That's great. Some of the other things that we've adopted here internally, we do, pulse surveys time to time. We've adopted an annual engagement survey. We also had a webinar, and I'll share the link in the comments for those who are watching, on stay interviews or stay conversations. So it's great, surveys and engagement surveys, things like that, people can answer anonymously, but there's nothing like sitting down and having that one-on-one conversation with someone. So before they're getting ready to leave, before they even have the thought of looking for a new job, why not have that conversation of learning more about what keeps them
That's
here,
right.
what motivates them, and implementing that into the structure of your team.
Mhm. That's right. I think stay interviews are important. They're very critical to the organization, because we often only hear why you left. Why
Mm-hmm.
were you dissatisfied? Where did we miss the mark? But oftentimes that stay interview helps to strengthen the work that we do, and it helps to tell our stories even better. I think stay interviews are really critical to an organization practicing inclusive practices.
Yep, absolutely. All right. Well, we haven't had any questions come through, but again, if you have a question for Sandy, if you're looking for additional educational opportunities, feel free to reach out to us at any time. This recording will be made available on both our social media platforms and our website for you to go back and view anything that you might have missed. But again, we're here to support you and your journey, and really be a resource for your organization as well. So please feel free to reach out at any time. Sandy, thanks so much for joining us today, and thanks for all of this great information.
Thank you.